Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. My name is Bodie, and I am your host. And on today's episode, we have news. Not sure why I said that so weird, but before we get into our news, we have patrons to thank. So I'm going to do it by alphabetical order this time. So we'll start with Alex, Alki Bob, Brad, Brian, Bruce C., Bruce W., Cameron, Charles F, Charles S, Chip. By the way, huge congratulations to Chip on retiring. Chris with the middle initial SB, and then we have Chris B and Christopher. Maybe this wasn't the best idea, but we're going to do it anyway. We're doing alphabetical order. That's how we're doing it this month. So I would also like to take a moment to thank those who support us on Acast Plus. Now, here's the thing. With Acast Plus, I don't actually get your name. I do get your email address, but I don't get your name. So I'm going to do my best based on your email address. We'll start off with Ravi, Sean, GeoHole, Analytical Agnostic, and that is it, unless you include me, because I support myself on Patreon and Acast Plus just to see what that all looks like. Yes, I pay myself $1 and then lose money because the dollar goes to those fees. Anyway, what I'm saying is I'm not asking anybody else to do something I'm not already doing. But thank you, everybody, whether you went to Acast Plus to sign up or you went to patreon.com/kilowatt. I really do appreciate you doing that and supporting the show. And again, like all of the money goes back into the show, which at the moment, that money is going to pay for me to go to CES for 2 days. Just to give you an idea, CES for 2 days, hotel was about $750, $780. They get you with the fees and the resort fees. And then I'm expecting to spend another $300 to $400 on food and just getting there, which I'm just going to drive my electric car there. So that shouldn't be terrible, but food isn't necessarily cheap. And I don't really drink, so it's really the food that's going to get you. But a huge thanks to everybody who's making this trip possible so that I can report on EV stuff coming out of CES. And my hope is that they'll have Scout Motors, they'll have those vehicles there showing them off so I can at least take a look. Maybe they won't have test drives, but maybe I can crawl around the inside of one of those bad chickens. All right, let's go ahead and get to our EV news, and I have good EV news. If you are a Costco member and you're looking to buy an EV, you could save up to $2,000 off an EV. Now, remember when I go through this, I said up to, and really there's only one EV where you're going to save $2,000, but you will save $1,000 off the following vehicles, whether they're 2024 model years or 2025. The Chevy Silverado EV, Equinox EV, and Blazer EV. If you're in the market for one of those vehicles, you're going to get $1,000 off. If you're looking at the GMC Sierra pickup truck or the Hummer EV pickup truck or SUV, you're going to get $1,000 off those vehicles. If you're looking for a Cadillac Lyric, again, $1,000 off. There is a scenario where you could get $2,000 off these vehicles if you are military, either current or former, and you can prove that. You'll get an extra $1,000 off those vehicles with the military discount over the Veterans Day weekend. Let's go ahead and move on to Volvo. You'll get $1,000 off the Volvo C40 or XC40. And then Polestar. Now, this is the one vehicle you're going to get $2,000 off of. The Polestar 3 SUV, which recently Polestar delivered their first Polestar 3 from its South Carolina plant. So Polestar being aggressive with the Costco incentives here. So you get an extra $2,000 off that vehicle. Most, if not all of these vehicles, I didn't really check, but most, if not all, qualify for the $7,500 federal tax credit if you're buying it here in the United States. And then you also have whatever state and local incentives you have available to you, depending on where you live. So not too shabby. Moving on to Ford, they are not giving you big discounts at Costco. They are pausing production of the F-150 Lightning in mid-November, so November 15th, I believe it is. The reason why is because the slower than expected demand. The production will pause for nearly 2 months. Ford recently cut the workforce at this particular plant Fortunately, no one lost their job in these cuts. Another 700 people were offered a choice. They could either retire with an early retirement package or whatever Ford was offering them, or they could go and work on the Bronco and Ranger lines at a different plant, which I believe is where this first 700 people, workers, were transferred to. So before all this happened, this particular plant had 3 shifts working, and now they are down to 1. Just for a point of reference, Ford sold a total of 7,162 Lightnings in Q3 of 2023 or 2024, excuse me. Their competition, which includes the Tesla Cybertruck, they sold 16,692 in Q3, according to Electric. You got the Chevy Silverado EV, which is doing well. I don't know that the numbers on that have been released, or at least I haven't seen them. Dodge is either preparing or just now shipping. They're real close either way, one way or the other. Their new EV pickup truck, and then you have all of the other trucks in the world that are internal combustion engines that exist. So yeah, that's tough times for Ford in the F-150 Lightning. By the way, Ford sold 23,509 EVs in Q3 2024. For reference, GM sold 32,095 vehicles or EVs during the same time period. And so far this year, Ford has sold 67,689 EVs, whereas GM has sold 70,450 EVs. All right, so that sounds not bleak, but it doesn't sound like that's good news for Ford. I do have a little silver lining here, and I don't even know if it's technically a silver lining. It just might be a light in the distance that Ford's going to. Ford has started their LFP battery production, which should help them lower costs because LFP batteries are cheaper to make. They're less energy dense, but they're more robust. If you don't know what LFP means, it's lithium iron phosphate batteries. That is certainly good news, but it's not going to help them in the short term because, again, they're expected to start actually delivering those on vehicles sometime in 2026. Moving on to autonomous driving, Zoox, an autonomous driving startup, which I guess they're technically owned by Amazon now, so I guess they're not quite a startup. But anyway, they offered this really cool autonomous pod. It's 4 seats. There's no steering wheel, no pedals, or drivers for that matter. They are currently testing in San Francisco, Las Vegas, Seattle, Austin, and Miami. I will definitely make sure, if I can, to check them out when I go to Vegas in January. But that's not why Zoox is in the news. Zoox chief technology officer was at TechCrunch Disrupt 2024, and he had this to say about Tesla.
The fundamental issue is they don't have technology that works. And by work, I want to differentiate between a driver assistance system that drives most of the time, except when it doesn't, and then you have to take over, versus a system that's so reliable and robust that you don't need a person in it. Also, our perspective is you really do need significantly more hardware than Tesla is putting in their vehicles to build a robo-taxi that is not just as safe, but as especially safer than a human.
So I don't know much about this Zoox company, but I would imagine that in the cities that they operate, they are allowed to operate within a very narrow corridor, right? They can't just go all over the city. They're going to be able to operate in this very well-defined area, just like Waymo and GM Cruise and that kind of thing. So what Tesla's doing is quite a bit harder than what Zoox is doing. Now, some could argue, and you might be right, that Zoox is and Waymo and GM Cruise, they're doing it the better way. They're starting at a much smaller scale, and then they have to, ramp up as they can prove to regulators that their technology works and it's safe. And Tesla does something different. Anyway, Elon must have saw these comments and was not a fan because he responded with the following. Now, I should actually say before I give Elon's comments, the CTO, his name is Jesse Levinson. Just adding a little context, because this is what Elon had to say. If he hadn't gotten bailed out by Amazon, his company would be dead already. That's what Elon said. which is interesting. So both of these people have comments that I believe are not necessarily fair to the other company, right? Let's take Jesse's comments, for instance. What Tesla is doing is significantly harder than what Zoox is doing because Tesla is operating in a bunch of different environments. And Zoox, again, like I said, they have this narrow fenced off area, geo fenced off area that they have to operate in. Now, does that mean that what each of these companies is doing is not amazing? No, they're both pretty amazing. They both have different ways that they're looking at tackling this problem. And by the way, when Tesla gets to the point of going and seeking regulatory authority to operate driverless taxis, they're going to have to figure this out as well. They're going to be geofenced. They're going to have to follow a bunch of rules, just like these other companies are. And Elon's going to see this as being handcuffed. So, just to be fair to Tesla, what they're doing is probably harder than what Zoox is doing at the moment. Having said that, I don't necessarily think Jesse Levinson's comments were incorrect either, by the way. But yeah, so then um, Elon, like I said, he talked about Zoox being bailed out by Amazon, which is a little rich because in 2009, Tesla released this really cool press release announcing that Daimler AG took around a 10% stake in Tesla. And the two companies were going to work on battery systems, electric drive systems, and vehicle projects together. So this initial investment was just $50 million, not much. In 2009, it was probably a hefty sum. Kept Tesla afloat. Somebody came in, created a partnership deal with Tesla, and guess what? That helped keep Tesla afloat, that $50 million investment. So it's not as if Tesla's never been bailed out before by other companies. They had some agreements with Toyota, and I'm sure that money exchanged hands there as well. But yeah, this is a $50 million investment. By the way, that $50 million investment, Daimler AG sold their stake and they they pocketed $780 million from that $50 million investment. So not too shabby. So that was definitely something that benefited Tesla, but it really benefited Daimler AG for sure. That's a nice return. Okie doke. That wraps up our EV news. Let's move on to our Tesla news. And I'm just going to say this real quick because I can't remember if I mentioned this yet or not, but Volvo and Polestar owners now have access to the supercharger network. I don't think Volvo or Polestar is giving current owners the adapters needed to charge on the supercharger network. You got to pay for that out of your own pocket, and that's like $250, $300, something like that. But still, if you wanted to do such a thing, you could. Tesla has a new test drive program in Europe and the Middle East. So this came from Tesla's Europe and Middle East X page or Twitter page. So basically, the tweet goes like this, or the post goes like this: Drive a Tesla, talk to no one. Locate and unlock a vehicle near you for a test drive entirely in the Tesla app. Then it has a 44-second video. The video starts off with someone on their phone and they're scheduling a test drive. And then it shows a bunch of Teslas in different vehicle locations. And then it shows people walking up to the cars, just opening it up and taking them for a test drive. And looks like they're genuinely having fun. And then it shows the car being returned, which honestly is probably the most important part of a test drive because otherwise it's Grand Theft Auto. So it's nice that Tesla completed the legal circle in the video. But I think this is a great way to offer test drives. And honestly, I think more companies should look into doing this. Like they have to have the right infrastructure set up. Tesla isn't uniquely set up to do this. Other companies can do it, probably Rivian and some other Polestar. But this is really cool. I don't want to have a conversation with somebody. I don't want somebody to try and sell me a car. I want to be able to take the car for a test drive, schedule my time, take the car for a test drive, and then be done. I don't want the whole interaction of what did you do before this? Oh, interesting. Tell me how working at Verizon was, because for whatever reason, every time I talk to somebody that works for Tesla sales, previously they worked at Verizon. At least here in Arizona, it is a very big pipeline for Tesla employees, Verizon cell phone sales. Anyway, I didn't know this, but Tesla did offer a similar program in the United States, but it was only in select states. So if you were one of the folks that had access to this, let me know what your experience was. Bodie, BODIE at 918digital.com. All right, let's move on to our final Tesla story. Business Insider interviewed some of Tesla's former internal self-driving team, like their test team. And the name for this project was Project Rodeo, which makes sense when you consider that the people testing this software were pushing it to the limits. And I guess it's software and hardware, but I'll just say software for now to make it easy. They, and we'll hear an excerpt from the article here in just a second, but they would go out and let the car do things that they knew would hurt them or could possibly hurt them, and wait till the last possible minute to intervene to see what the car would do. So here's an excerpt from the article.
Test drivers said they sometimes navigated perilous scenarios, particularly those drivers on Project Rodeo's critical intervention team, who say they're trained to wait as long as possible before taking over the car's controls. Tesla engineers say there's a reason for this. The longer the car continues to drive itself, the more data they have to work with. Experts in self-driving tech and safety say this type of approach could speed up the software's development, but risks the safety of the test drivers and people on public roads.
One driver described the experience just like riding a bull, which is apt because it's called rodeo. But they're just trying to hang on for as long as they can. So when you and I are out driving our vehicle, anytime we feel uncomfortable, we could just intervene and reset the car, and either we don't turn it back on again, or we reset the car and then turn it back on again and move about our day, right? These drivers are trained to let it go much further than you and I would. Let's put it that way. One driver had this to say: "You're pretty much running on adrenaline the entire 8-hour shift. There's this feeling that you're on the edge of something, of something going seriously wrong." It's not funny, but I get that. Here's another excerpt from the article.
Critical intervention test drivers, who are among Project Rodeo's most experienced, let the software continue driving even after it makes a mistake. They're trained to stage interventions, taking manual control of the car, only to prevent a crash, said the 3 critical intervention drivers and 5 other drivers familiar with the team's mission. Drivers on the team and internal documents say that cars rolled through red lights, swerved into other lanes, or failed to follow posted speed limits while FSD was engaged. The drivers said they allowed FSD to remain in control during these incidents because supervisors encouraged them to try to avoid taking over.
If this is true, that is absolutely terrifying. And I can empathize with somebody who is running on that much adrenaline for 8 hours. That's going to take you several hours just to come down and relax and let your brain breathe, for sure. So my question to you is this something that you would participate in? Like, if your town had this program for Tesla or any other company, it doesn't have to be Tesla, would this be something you would feel comfortable doing? Another question would be, do you feel comfortable with automakers testing in this way on public streets? Like, is this something that you would like to happen? Is this something that you knew was happening? I think we all knew on some level Tesla's testing this software on public streets. Now, what I didn't quite realize, and maybe I should have because I've been doing this podcast for 8 years, what I didn't realize was that they were letting it get this far. And listen, this is a Business Insider report. I'm going to say that it does seem like Business Insider has a bias against Tesla. They write plenty of negative stories about Tesla. Some of them valid, some of them I don't think are always valid, but take that for what it's worth. But if this is in fact happening on public roads, this kind of testing, how does it make you feel? It doesn't make me feel great, if I'm being honest with you. like on some level, I realize that these companies need data, and the best way to get data is let the cars go. But the first time that ends up in a fatality, um, that's not going to be good PR for your company. That's not going to be good legally and financially for your company. You're going to get sued. You're going to lose, especially if this is something that's widespread. And Tesla's supervisors are encouraging this kind of thing. I don't think that's a good idea. I will say, a long time ago, I worked for a company that did one of the first databases for automakers and like their parts and stuff like that. And this was like in maybe 2000. I don't know if it was one of the first. Our software that we had, from talking to the engineers that worked on it, they seemed to think it was the most advanced software that was out there, right? Ran on Windows, which was huge at the time. So anyway, when I was talking to one of the engineers, he was recounting the story that he had been told, and I heard this from another person later in life too. Was there's a certain amount of injuries and deaths that are kind of accepted when you build a product like this. Like, if we have more than X amount of injuries and X amount of deaths, then it's something we need to look into, right? I don't know if Tesla looks at that on their risk assessments when they do these full self-driving and they calculate that in or not. I'm sure they would rather not have anybody die, but and this was, oh man, 30-ish years ago. So it also could be very likely that the information I had was A, wrong because it was 30 years ago, and B, doesn't happen anymore. So if you work in that kind of industry, let me know if that's the case. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. I'm not 100% sure it's 100% true, but it is interesting. And if you're one of those folks that worked on one of those teams and you want to share your anonymously share your experience with me, you can email me, Bodie, BODIE at 918digital.com. You can also find me on X at 918digital. And yeah, if you want to support the show, Acast Plus link is in the show notes, or you can go to patreon.com/kilowatt or support kilowatt.com. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will talk to you on Friday.